my channel. If you saw my last review of Scarlet, you'll know it wasn't the easiest day for me. So I'm happy to report that I'm doing better. It still bothers me, but it happened. What can I do but move on? In other channel news, I know that I said this whole week was gonna be all about the Lunar Chronicles, but I just don't have that kind of time. Like, I don't have the kind of time to read all the books. Luckily, I realized that I can actually finish the Lunar Chronicles series. I just am not going to have time to do Gilded and Heartless. But as they're not actually part of the Lunar Chronicles family, I'm not going to worry about it. I still will get to them. I mean, I'm disappointed because I bought Gilded in anticipation of reading it, but what you're going to do, I do have a life. Not much of one, but I do have one. The other bit of channel news is to remind you about my giveaway. I'm giving away Cinder, so yeah, this whole week, all you gotta do, like, comment, subscribe, tell me why you deserve to win Cinder. As for today's book, it is Cress. And I will say this is probably my favorite book so far. It's also the thickest book so far, which probably has a lot to do with it, because it's given the story time to develop. I enjoy Cress. Cress is the embodiment of Rapunzel, and I have two minds in terms of Cress. One is she's annoying in her naivete, but it's her naivete that makes her so great because you see her character development, her growth. I thought there were some problematic moments in terms of point of view because the series is close third person. However, in Cress, there are some moments where it feels very omniscient, and I'm like, who's the narrator right now? Because it skips perspective. And I'm like, I thought Cress was my narrator, so why am I now knowing things about Cinder that Cress couldn't possibly know? And there were perspectives I thought we could have done without. The deal is, go watch the other reviews to get some backstory. I'm not going to do backstory here. I don't have time for that. But Cress is a shell. She is from Luna, and she is a shell, which means that she can't manipulate people's bioelectricity. And so on Luna, there was a shell infanticide, which means that all the shells were supposed to be killed. Cress's parents gave her up, and instead of being murdered, she and just a select group of other shells were kind of hidden away, used as experiments, not like in a nasty way, but just they would have their blood drawn and, they would do this and that and the other. And she develops this affinity for technology. And it is noticed by Queen Lavanna and her head thaumaturge, Sibylmira, and then they stow her away on this satellite so that she can monitor Earth, so that they can know everything that's going on. And Cress, at the end of Cinder, had gotten in touch with Cinder. Like, the whole reason that Cinder met Kai was because his android had stopped working, and when Cinder goes in and fixes it, she finds a lunar chip, and this lunar chip somehow was put in there by, I think it was when Queen Lavanna had sent her minions, and they had inserted this chip into Nancy in order to get information. It was designed by Cress. So this is how Cress is able to contact Cinder and how they're able to get together. I keep wanting to say the end of Scarlet, but that's not true. So at the beginning of Cress, the Cinder and her crew, they decide, hey, we're gonna go rescue Cress. So they're on their way there when Sibylmira turns up unexpectedly. She learns about the plan, she foils the plan, and she leaves Cress and Thorn in the satellite, which is now crashing to Earth. She takes Carswell's ship back to where Cinder is waiting, and then there's a skirmish. She is able to trick Cinder into thinking that her guard is actually Scarlet, and so Cinder rescues Scarlet only for Sibylmira to take Scarlet back to Luna, and now Scarlet is a captive on Luna. We get one perspective from Scarlet this whole time, and I thought it was pretty unnecessary. Maybe if it had been an epilogue chapter, kind of a teaser of like, oh my gosh, this is what's happening to Scarlet, because all throughout Cress, Wolf is almost catatonic. He just can't deal with life because Scarlet's not with them. And that is something that I discussed in Scarlet, that I didn't quite understand this romance that built. And Meyer continues to build up on it, and I thought it was a bit melodramatic. But I do think, you know, we see this whole worry about Scarlet. And then if you think about it cinematically, where there's a sequel to the movie, and so you get through the movie only to kind of get a glimpse into something that's going to happen for the next movie that kind of shocks you and leaves you hanging on for more, I think that would have been more effective. But we are close to the end, but not really at the end, when we get this glimpse into what's happening to Scarlet. And we, like, these really kind of throwaway perspectives happen towards the end, because then we get one perspective from Sybil Mira when Cinder and her crew are storming the palace because Kai is supposed to marry Lavana, and they're like, we have to kidnap him and get him off and blah, blah, blah. Granted, I'm listening to it, so I'm not as attuned to what's going on because I'm probably driving or doing something else. But I was like, how did we get to Sybil Mira, and why are we with Sybil Mira? Like, why do I need to know what's happening at this instant? I felt like some of these perspectives, even Aiko gets a perspective chapter, and even with her, I'm like, I don't really need to see how she infiltrates the other androids, because she's given an android body. So I'm like, I don't really need to see that, because I could have figured it out otherwise. And so those were sort of the things that weakened Cress. But on the whole, I really enjoyed how Meyer played with the Rapunzel theme, with the Rapunzel story, because like with Cinder, she took the bare essentials. Cress has really long hair. Carswell's ship is the Rampion. She's stuck, not in a tower per se, but she's stuck in an isolated area. Then when she and Carswell finally hit Earth, he's blinded. So we get all these little things that give you a taste of what you know, but I enjoyed the way that Meyer changed the story to fit her overall narrative. I will say, as per the singing, I don't know if I necessarily needed it. Of all the things that she chose to include, it felt like the most inane, but that's neither here nor there. That's super small, but it was kind of like a show-off moment in my opinion. And so I really didn't care that Cress could sing an opera speaking Italian words that she doesn't even know what they mean, and she's absolutely amazing at it. So but that's a personal problem. That really has nothing to do with the book. Let's get to Cress and Carswell, or Captain, or Thorn, or whatever you want to call him. Let's get them plummeting to Earth. As I said, Cress is really good at technology. She's really good at computers and hacking and all this kind of stuff. So she's able to slow their descent by enabling the parachute. They crash in the Sahara. Carswell loses his sight because he hits his head. So now they have to traverse the desert. And it's pretty fun because Cress has always had this view of Earth, and she's really excited to be on Earth. But she gets there and she is completely unprepared. She's never even owned a pair of shoes. How is she gonna walk across burning sand? So it's interesting, and it's a great way, because she has this crush on Carswell because he has this reputation, and as essentially the queen's spy, she needs to know everything about everything and everyone. And so she's done her homework and she's developed this crush and come up with this idea about who he is based off of things she's found out. And of course he's handsome. And so it's a great way to get them interacting. And you see how she's completely wrong about him, but he might be one of my favorite characters. He's so funny. So I enjoyed how flawed he was, yet at the same time, he didn't really care that he was flawed. He owned his flaws, and that made him enjoyable to me. Eventually, they stumble across this caravan group, and the group kind of nurses them back to health and then brings them to an African town. And it's while they're here that Cress is then kidnapped because news of this crashed lunar satellite has hit. And the people from this caravan have figured it out. And so Cress sees Thorn playing poker, and so they're posing as a married couple, and she still has this massive crush on him. She still believes she's in love with him, which we know my feelings on that kind of stuff, but in this book, I was okay with it. She's hurt. And so she runs away, only to realize she locked herself out of her room. One of the people from the caravan kind of tricks her into coming with her, and then they kidnap her. And I really enjoyed this part because you're worried about her. You're like, what in the world is gonna happen? And what happens is Cinder, her goal at the end of Cinder was to find Dr. Erland, who was where? In Africa. And so their goal after rescuing Cress from the satellite was to go to Africa and find Dr. Erland. And so they have come to Earth. They have found Dr. Erland. They're kind of getting themselves together. Wolf is catatonic, which I will get into. We've learned that Dr. Erland has come to this village because it is where Lettumosis started. So he has been doing tests and figuring things out, and he's found a case of a lunar, granted it's a shell, but still it's a lunar, who has contracted the disease. It's a mutated form. So anyways, he's still doing his research, but he wants shells. He wants lunar shells who he can not necessarily use as science experiments, but use to figure out how to find a cure for Lettumosis, kind of figure out where it came from. So this is what the caravanners do, is they take Cress, who has admitted she's a lunar shell, to Dr. Erland, who, and here's a spoiler alert, is her dad. And we've gotten various chapters from his perspective. I'm on the fence as to whether or not I like his perspectives. I think they do add a good bit of information we couldn't have gotten elsewhere, so I'm fine with it. In the end, we'll leave them in. And so he, upon seeing Cress for the first time, is like, I know this girl. I think she is my long-lost daughter. We have already learned that he didn't want to give her up, but his wife, because there's such a stigma around shells, that his wife was like, take it away. And he believed she died. He believed that Cress was gone. So anyways, he sees her and he's like, she's my kid. So then he pays the money for her. She's super freaked out. He's able to draw a vial of blood before she attacks him and runs away. And then I think this is interesting, slightly laughable, but interesting. He wakes up, and the first thing he does is he runs the blood test. I guess he has come to the conclusion that there's really no point in chasing after her. Like, she doesn't trust him. It's gonna do no good. She's probably far away by now. So he wakes up and he runs the blood test, and it reveals that yes, she is his daughter, and there we go. Turns out that Cress didn't get very far. She didn't think she could get very far, so she ran into a room and hid in the closet. And then she comes out of the room, and I can't quite remember. I don't know if this was Wolf's room or if this was another room. And then she stumbled upon Wolf's room and noticed that he had a port screen. And she wanted to use a port screen so she could get in touch with Carswell. Wolf was greatly injured when Sybil Mira came to the ship where Cinder had been. because he just was. And so he has basically been put in a coma in order to heal. But additionally, because he did not react well when he learned that Scarlet had been kidnapped. Naturally, he wakes up while Cress is in the room. Things get kind of crazy and hectic, but then it turns out that Carswell has managed to come find her, and the whole gang is reunited, and the doctor has not told anybody that Cress is his daughter, but that's neither here nor there nor anywhere. Everything else is hunky-dory. Their next move is to kidnap Emperor Kai, because he is slated to marry Levana, yet Cinder is like, he can't marry Levana because she's gonna murder him. We gotta save him, this, that, the other. And so with the aid of Jason, who is Sybil Mira's guard, who she had glamored to look like Scarlet so that Cinder then took him on their ship while Sybil took Scarlet off and away. With him, who you don't know, can you trust him, can you not trust him? He was another minor perspective, like super minor, super short, where you learn that he doesn't like Sybil, and he knows that what he's doing is not okay, but he has no control over it, which I hope to God I remember to talk about that. He essentially doesn't try to prevent his kidnapping. He wants to get away from Sybil. So he's a great character because you don't really know which side of the line he's on. I wish we'd gotten more of him. We will get more of him in winter, but I'm not going there yet. So he was a character I would have liked more of, but that's neither here nor there either. So yes, they go off to rescue Emperor Kai. Then there's this whole thing with the doctor taking Carswell to the medical wing in order to help restore his sight. And while there, he realizes that he has contracted leishmaniasis, so he quarantines himself. And then everybody, I forget the order of events, but I think what goes is Cinder is able to kidnap Kai, and then they go to the laboratory to speak with the doctor, who reveals what's going on with him, who reveals that Cress is his daughter. And then they go up to the roof where they encounter Sybil Mira, who has ambushed them at their ship. She has brought guards. Cinder is able to kind of become super Cinder in terms of her gift, her lunar gift, and she is able to infiltrate Sybil's mind and make her go crazy. And so then Sybil ends up killing herself. She jumps off the building, but this is not before she's already kidnapped Jason and set him aside. Cinder and her gang are able to get on the Rampion and go away, and that's kind of where their story ends, only for us to come to Levana, who I like this. I do wish that Levana's perspective had been woven in a bit more so that it didn't feel so sudden at the end. But we find her approaching the doctor in his quarantine, and he reveals, so here's a spoiler. If you saw my review of Cinder, you'll know that I thought I remembered that Queen Levana had actually manufactured leishmaniasis. And I was right. So what was happening with all of these shells, yes, some of them were killed, but it wasn't even Levana. It was actually her parents and then her sister Queen Channery before her, who were experimenting on shells and trying to figure out how to create a virus, a disease. So this is where we learn it, because he's like, I figured it out. I know exactly what you were doing. He ends up dying, and Levana is angry. She's more angry about the fact that she's not Empress than that she didn't get to marry Kai. We are getting all of these small hints, this foreshadowing about a true husband, someone that she really did care about, and she still wears the ring even though she glamours it so that nobody can see it. So, but she just wants not even world domination, she wants universal domination. So she wants to be empress, and she's really ticked that she didn't get to make it happen. And that is kind of where we end there. You know, we got the little bit of Scarlet and a little glimpse of Winter. That is Cress. I wish that I could say I liked Cinder in this book, but I feel like when I'm away from her, she stops developing. In Cinder, she was the only narrator. But with each respective book, we get progressively more narrative points of view. And I think Cinder's development is really important because she's essentially the main character. She's Princess Celine. She's the one who's supposed to be able to bring down Lavanna. Yet I don't get enough of her to satisfy me, to make me think that she is capable of doing something like that. Then we're getting into Winter, and I'm like, I don't understand how we got there. Like, emotionally, I don't understand how we got there. Capability-wise, I don't understand how we got there. In Winter, I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but it's this book really that does the bulk of the heavy lifting in terms of developing Cinder. So to get to Winter, and Cinder suddenly realizes how okay she is with herself and how she has accepted her cyborgness. I'm like, what? And I'm sure it's just a subtle thing that Meyer has done. But for me, I would have liked a little bit more overt storytelling in terms of what's going on with Cinder and how she's getting from point A to point B within herself, particularly with her gift. Again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because this is stuff that I'm continually thinking about as I'm listening to Winter, but it's part of Cress too. It's the whole idea of the lunar gift. And I would have enjoyed seeing Cinder develop that more because she didn't know she was lunar. So it's part of who she was that she didn't know was part of who she was. And so we get moments of telling in which Cinder is working with Wolf, because as an enhanced soldier, he's a different kind of person. It's somebody who has more resistance and willpower, and I would have enjoyed seeing that because I feel like it's sort of metaphorical. Like, she has to overcome this boundary. She has to learn this part about herself. She has to develop this part of herself in order to become who she's supposed to be to succeed in the end of the series. So I wanted more of that. I wanted to see more of her character development. But because there was so much else going on, it fell by the wayside. On that note, I am going to remember this whole thing about Wolf and Scarlet. As I mentioned, he is practically catatonic because Scarlet has been kidnapped. The thing with Wolf is Queen Lavanna, and actually I think it was Channery and her parents before her again, who had started developing this army of superhumans, essentially. So they were splicing together kind of wolf genes and people genes. Get it? You know, Little Red Riding Hood, Scarlet and the Wolf. What? I have problems with his character in Scarlet, but in the end, I guess you could say they fall in love. They fall into something enough that he begins to view Scarlet as his alpha female, as he is the alpha male of his pack. So they have this bond. So I can buy the bond. I don't necessarily buy the romance of the bond, but I do buy the bond because that is a legitimate thing. I can buy the fact that when Scarlet is kidnapped, he no longer has his alpha female, and just because of his genetics, that's problematic. But because I struggle with their relationship, and I struggle with how quickly everything developed between them, it was really hard for me to swallow his behavior. Because he was either catatonic or over the top angry. In Scarlet, he seemed to be able to control himself. Yet in Cress, he had no self-control whatsoever. And I guess that just goes back to characterization and character development, where I didn't understand why. Part of me is saying he's lost his alpha female, so therefore he has lost his center. But on the other hand, he's the kind of character who is like, I know my place. I know there's a place and a time for every behavior and every emotion, and I'm not gonna let it get the best of me when it shouldn't. It's like that's all he does in Cress, is mourn the loss of Scarlet, yet there's really nothing about Scarlet. All we get is that she's not there. And then we get one little scene in which Scarlet is flying Sybil Mira back to Luna. And then we get the scene where she is being brought before Queen Lavanna, and she may or may not have to chop a finger or a hand off. And then we meet Princess Winter. But that's a subplot that I thought was underdeveloped. I would have enjoyed more of what are we gonna do to get Scarlet? Like, what's going on with Scarlet? Scarlet. All we get is Wolf is incredibly angry, and he's like, you have no idea what they're doing to her. And that's supposed to suffice for us as to what kind of peril Scarlet may be in. I was over Wolf. He was a completely useless character in this book because he literally did nothing. It's like, what? It's like, did Meyer just not know what to do with Wolf? And so she did nothing with him at all, and she blamed it on this incident? Anyways, what was the other thing I wanted to talk about? I feel like it had something to do with Cress. I can't figure out what I was going to say. But there is something else that I want to talk about, and that is Lavanna. Lavanna slash her thaumaturges slash her minions slash this whole lunar gift thing. Starting with Lavanna, she is a fantastic villain. I think I mentioned it in one of my other reviews, but I love how cold and calculating she is and how you love to hate her. I don't quite understand how she gets away with what she gets away with. That I don't really care for, but I like the hints that we get at why Lavanna is the way she is. And yeah, just her ruthlessness. Like, she wants to be Empress. She wants to rule everything because she has an end game. She has ulterior motives. There's something going on with her. She made me want to just go, ugh! And that is amazing. I love that feeling. As much as I hate that feeling, I love that feeling. But as per her thaumaturges and her minions, that's one of those things. I almost hate them as much as I hate the main bad guy. Because if you think about what makes a good bad guy a good bad guy, it's because they're three-dimensional. They're not just bad for the sake of being bad. Maybe they're not actually bad. Maybe they're bad in our eyes, but in their own eyes, they're just doing what they think is right. Not the case in this case. But it makes me think about, how did they get to be who they got to be? You know, there's all of those fairy tale retellings or those adverse fairy tales where you see things from another light, like Wicked. So I was just like, I almost hate the thaumaturges more because they're so self-righteous. They, I guess, are really power hungry, and I enjoy hating them, but my dislike of them is different from my dislike of Lavanna because you don't really get anything about why they are the way they are. They're flat, which they're kind of supposed to be, so I shouldn't be complaining, but I'm a negative person, so here we go. It's like I love how terrible they are, how much you hate them because they do all the wrong things, yet they get what they want. Yet I'm just like, why is Sybil Mira so ruthless? How did she become the head thaumaturge? Like, does she just have this innate dislike for earthens or this innate dislike for shells? Before she died, or maybe even posthumously, I would enjoy getting a little bit of her, maybe a little bit of rising in the ranks, because in Winter we get more of that because she's around all of these characters and around these situations, so we do get some of backstory. But then in terms of this lunar gift, I'm a little confused. I think Meyer finally touched on it in Winter, but I'm kind of confused as to how it works, because I know it enables a lunar to take control of another human being. But then sometimes it seems like that person is aware, and then sometimes it seems like that person is unaware. So all of these soldiers that they have, oh, that's something I need to talk about. So all these soldiers that they have, they're not fighting because they believe in the cause. They're fighting because they're controlled by somebody else. Aside from not understanding how it all works, I kind of wish that this lunar gift wasn't so foolproof. I mean, obviously, Cinder's adoptive father has come up with a prototype that can dampen bioelectricity, but that he's dead, he's gone. Like, as of now, we have no idea where this patent is, like if it can be recreated, because the only people who are involved with it are dead. And so I kind of wish that there were some way to resist, but everybody seems like such puppets, especially when we finally get to Earth and we get to see Cinder learning how to use the gift or things like that, and how easy it is to control earthens. I guess it's easier to control an earthen than a lunar, and then obviously then there's the wolf guys who are ridiculously difficult to control. But I wish that, because it would just make it a more interesting novel if someone were able to be like, no, I'm not gonna do it. Like, what's the book I'm thinking? Oh, Harry Potter, where he's put under the Imperious Curse, and he's like, you know, like half my brain is saying yes, half my brain is saying no. And because I think even just giving a portion of the people this ability to do that would have made the novel more interesting, rather than, well, there's nothing we can do about it. If they're going to control me, they're going to control me, and I'm not even going to know they're doing it half the time. It's too easy, and I don't particularly care for it, only because it's repeated over and over and over again, and so I get tired of hearing it. But what I just remembered that I needed to remember or to talk about was the whole soldier thing. I might be getting ahead of myself here, and actually I think I'm definitely getting ahead of myself here. But I'm just going to go with it because you're going to come back tomorrow and we're going to get to the end of it anyways. Because Kai doesn't marry Lavanna, she gets upset and she's like, pact is off, I'm gonna invade your country. And so she does, and she also attacks the palace. So Kai returns to Earth and he's like, these are the terms in which they returned me. With all of this, we learn that they've had 100-odd years of peace on Earth, and because of that, their military, their soldiers are essentially for show, and so they're completely under-equipped to fight Lavanna and her wolf soldiers. And I was like, is that how it is? If you don't have any imminent threat, you let your defense force fall to the wayside? Again, it was one of those things that I thought Meyer made too easy. Like, Earth can't defend itself because we haven't needed to defend ourselves for over 100 years. So this is what's gonna happen. There's gotta be somebody around somewhere being like, you know what? Any day now, especially because Luna is essentially an imminent threat. For decades. And that's another thing I want more of, is like, why is Luna so bad? Like, what is it about these people that everybody's scared of them? I mean, except for the whole lunar gift thing. Like, when did they become so bad? My thought is, of course, there could be some bad people, but can't some of the population of Luna just be normal with this extraordinary gift? But I'm like, you know that Lavana and her sister before her and their parents before them, not good people. So wouldn't you be preparing to be able to defend yourselves just in case? So that, yeah, obviously that bothered me. I think I'm gonna end there because the wind is still a little bit out of my sails when it comes to doing these reviews. Let me know what kind of things you like in book reviews, what kinds of things you don't like in book reviews, so that I can make these the best ever. See ya.